All right. Hey, everybody. I'm not sure what happened, but after the intro to Excel part 1, I didn't have a recording. So for some reason, it didn't get recorded. Most likely my fault for not starting that up. I don't know. So thought I'd throw together this quick review of everything we did in our first class, Intro to Excel part 1. So I'm going to share my screen and try to remember everything we talked about, run through that real quick, and you guys can then use this video to practice between now and next Tuesday. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm just going to share the Excel part of the screen so it's nice and big on everyone's screen. All right. I've got my other computer going here, so I can just kind of make sure that what you see is what I'm doing, and we'll go from there. So we're looking at the Excel spreadsheet. One of the things that I said in the very beginning of class was there's a little trick in all Microsoft programs that allows you to shrink, zoom in, zoom out of Microsoft program material. And so to do that in Microsoft Excel or Word or PowerPoint, whatever, you hold down the Control button on your keyboard and use the scroll wheel on your mouse. And as I scroll, you can see my spreadsheet. I'm zooming in, or I can zoom out just depending on what way I scroll the wheel on my mouse. So I'm going to scroll it in to where we had it during class yesterday. So it's nice and large for everyone to see on whatever tablet, phone, computer you're using. So we started right here in cell B3. And if you'll remember, that reference is based on the column we're in, column B, and row 3, where the column B and row 3 intersects. We call that cell B3. And you can tell it's selected. I've clicked there with my mouse because there's a green border around that box. So if I click down here, now the cell that I have selected is cell B7, or if I click over here, the cell is D4. So I'm going to move my mouse pointer to B3 and left click there, such that now B3 is selected. And if you'll remember, we just started entering some data and learned how to move around the cells in Excel. So I typed a 23 here, and the different ways we learn to move around cells, I can hit the Tab key right now. If I hit Tab, I'll move a cell to the right. Okay, so I entered some data there. Another way I can move is using the arrow keys. So if I hit the right arrow key, I move to the right of the cell I was at. Now I'm in D3. I'm going to enter some data there. I can also hit Return or Enter. On some keyboards, it's Enter. Most keyboards, I think, probably in the computing world, it's Enter, but some say Return, like a carriage return on a typewriter. So I'm going to hit Enter, and the cell selector moved down one. Just to be consistent, I'm going to start back over here where I was, and I'm going to enter 877. I entered 15. I entered 25. Let's see, where else was I at? And so I'm also looking at what the class had at the end of class. So these are the numbers we had in there at the end of class. So let's see, tank 1, 2, tank 3, 1731. I'll enter a 55. I'll enter a 16. Let's see, and I'll enter 25, 85, and oh, we didn't do that. So what I wanted us to do, I I guess it was at this point, I didn't enter these numbers. So I'm going to highlight those cells and hit delete. We actually just entered these numbers in class. Trying to pull all this from memory. So we just entered these 6 cells in class. And what I taught you about then was this little tiny anchor button at the bottom of any cell that's selected or series of cells selected. You can see there's a little dot at the bottom right-hand corner. And so whenever I selected all these cells, I clicked my mouse on cell B3, I held the left click down and dragged across those cells to select all 6. I used that little tiny green dot in the bottom right-hand corner to have Excel populate some more data for us. So when I move my cursor over that bottom right little green dot, it became a crosshair, as you can see on the screen right now. Some of you didn't see crosshairs, not sure why, but you were able to do this anyway. So I click on that little green dot and hold the left click and drag down. I drag down 3 rows, and Excel made some assumptions on what I wanted to do. Some of you had different numbers in here based on how we enter the data. Excel makes some assumptions, but we didn't care. We just wanted a rows and columns of numbers to work with and apply formulas, so it didn't really matter. So now we've got 5 rows, 3 columns of data. We then came up here to cell B2. I clicked in cell B2 and we typed the word Jan, short for January. We typed Feb for February and MAR for March. And I explained that with some series like this, there's no sense typing them all out because Excel will make some assumptions when you copy that range of cells. In this case, if we highlight those cells, we type the months in, and we take that little green dot at the bottom right of this range we selected. If we click and drag that little green dot to the right, Excel will make an assumption that, hey, he's got January, February, March. He probably wants to continue that series of months. And that's correct. That's what I want to do. So let's see if Excel does that. As I click and drag to the right, you can see below the cell borders that I'm now expanding to the right, it says it said April in column E. It says now May in column F. So Excel is letting me know what it will paste in those cells when I release the mouse left click button. So there's June. I'm going to go over again. There's July. There's August. If I release the mouse button now, bam, Excel has correctly assumed and put into my spreadsheet the rest of the series that I wanted anyway. So I didn't have to type all that stuff. Whenever you're entering data into Excel, if you know you're going to be entering any kind of series, just put in the first 2 or 3 values of that series, and then see if you can use that bottom right little green dot anchor and have Excel populate the rest of the series for you. For example, the next thing we did, we clicked in cell A3. We selected cell A3, so I'm going to click there now. And so we see the box around A3. We know that's the cell that is selected. I want to put in, because I'm building a database here of maybe production out of tanks. So I'm going to put in tank number 1. Well, I'm going to have the same thing below, tank 2, 3, 4, 5. I think Excel is smart enough, just because there's a 1 in the cell I'm typing in right now, to make the assumption that I want to start counting. And so after entering that data in cell A3, I've got tank A1 or tank number 1 selected. I'm going to grab that little green dot at the bottom right, click on it, left click, drag down, and sure enough, you can see on the screen, Excel is letting me know what it's going to put in these cells as I drag across, and it is correctly assuming that I want an increasing list of tank numbers. So I didn't have to type in tanks 2, 3, 4, and 5. I just let Excel make the correct assumption that I was starting a series of tanks with 1, and Excel correctly assumed that and put 2, 3, 4, 5 in for me. Pretty amazing, really, how it does that. So we then had this spreadsheet of data, tank 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And at this point, I think is when I mentioned we don't want to lose data ever. We want to make sure it's being saved. So I'm going to come up here to what's called the menu bar at the top of my Excel window, just below the title bar of that window. Right now, the tab Home is selected. There's other tabs. There's the Insert tab, the Page Layout tab, the Formulas tab. We were on Home when we were doing the spreadsheet below. But I want to click on the tab just to the left of Home called File. And I think I explained to you that I personally like to use Save As. I have reason to my madness there. A lot of times we'll want to save copies of things just for any number of reasons. And if we use just save, sometimes we'll write over work that we didn't want to write over. And so I like using Save As and just making sure I specify what I'm saving and where I'm saving it. So I click on Save As. That's just personal preference, by the way. I'll show you something else I do once I'm sure I've done this Save As correctly. There's a lot of selections here that you see under Save As. I'm going to go to Browse because me personally, I just like to select and use the File Explorer within Windows to select where I want to save things. I'm real familiar with the structure and how that works, and I'm more comfortable with it. So I like going here, so I choose Browse, and I think I told everyone, for the purposes of this class, let's just save this under the desktop so that it actually appears out on our desktop and we don't have to go hunt for it again. But anyone who was in class that is real familiar with where to save things, maybe you've already got a hierarchy of 11 and Excel class and files maybe, and you know how to do all that, and you're putting in different save versions of file. You're an expert at saving. Feel free to put it wherever you want. Anyone else, just use desktop. We can delete it later. We can keep it. We can move it, whatever. So I'm going to use the desktop, and I initially named this Excel Intro 1-1 when I saved it with you all yesterday. I'm going to change that name because I'm doing a different file now. Yesterday was yesterday, and I just kind of like keeping things separate. So I'm going to add for recording on the end of this. So I'll know that this particular spreadsheet is what I used for recording this video. But I'm going to save it to the desktop. So I'm going to hit save after I name it. Now up in the title bar of Excel, you can see where it says Excel Intro 1-1 for recording. So I know what file name I've given this when I look at the title bar in Excel. Okay, So the next thing we did is we learned how to manually enter very cryptic formula, which I only did to show you how to enter formulas using the plus sign and the equal sign. Later on, we used a function that I think is better for summing data. But here's what we did. We typed a total line. So I'm in cell A9 and I typed total. I came over into the January column, the B column, and I encouraged everyone to start every formula with the equal sign. I think in class someone mentioned that you could start with the plus sign, and that's true. You could start with a minus sign, but for the purposes of this class, I would love for all of you to get used to actually starting formulas with the equal sign. So I'm going to hit equals. And then what I can do is click on the cells that I'm adding to build this formula. So the next thing I did was I went up with my mouse and I clicked on cell B3. And what happened was, you can see in the cell, Microsoft Excel automatically put the cell reference B3, that's where I clicked, into this formula. So it knows I'm building a formula, and wherever I click, whatever cell I click on, it's going to type that into this formula for me. So we're going to add these 5 cells, and we're going to build this manual cryptic formula here just by putting plus signs. So I'm going to put a plus sign. I'm typing plus on my keyboard. I'm going to point at the next cell I want added in this formula, and that's cell B4. I'm going to click cell B4, and Excel typed B4 into the formula for me. Draw your attention also to the formula bar up here. It's also being built up in the formula bar. So right now I have equals B3 plus B4 up here as well. So we just continued this down the range of cells in column B. So I'm going to hit plus on the keyboard, point and click at the next cell in my data, which is cell B5. Sure enough, Excel added B5 to the formula, both in the formula bar and in the cell. So I'm going to hit plus again, click on the next cell in the list, hit the plus sign again, and click on the next cell in the list. So there's my formula to add up all 5 tanks data for January. And it's in the cell. And you notice also that Microsoft Excel has color-coded both the cells and the typing of the formula. So we're going to see later how that really helps audit our formulas, this color coding that Microsoft does for us. We've got our formula though. It's what we want. Let's hit enter. And sure enough, the total is 8,655. But how can I be sure of that? I warned everyone in class that sometimes assuming that Excel has done the math correctly can get you into trouble. It's always good to double check numbers in your spreadsheet. And so one of the ways you could do this is the status bar, which is the bar at the bottom of the Excel window, down here at the very bottom. I had you right click. On this very, very bottom this bottom bar called the status bar, and up pops a menu of all the things that you can have appear on the status bar depending on what you're doing in your spreadsheet. And I just made sure that all of you had the sum in this list checked. So there's a check mark next to sum. And then I wanted you to also make sure that you had check marks by maximum, minimum, count, and average. Okay? So you can uncheck those, you can check them. And what happens with those being checked? We're gonna click and drag across this range of numbers that we just built a formula to sum for us, these numbers. So I'm gonna click and drag across these numbers so that those are selected. And whenever you do that, down on the status bar, see, I'm gonna pull this up just a bit. Yeah, that didn't make any difference on your screens, I don't think. But down in the status bar, you'll notice that the average of those cells has been posted on that status bar. How many cells with numbers in them? The count is there. The minimum number, the maximum number, and the sum. And the sum, it says, is 8,655. Crucial, because that's exactly what our formula reported the sum to be. So we've double checked our formula is correct. It correctly summed those cells. So we were able to double check that easily using the status bar. Now, we learned with January, February, and March, we learned with tank number 1 that Excel will make some assumptions when we copy cells to other cells. And we did that with the formula at the bottom of the January data. We grabbed the little green dot. You know what? And I'm getting tired of calling that a little green dot. And the only reason I do that is because sometimes I forget all the naming conventions within Excel. So let me just real quickly get the specific name for that. I'll tell you here in a second. You guys probably already know it. Wish you could just speak up and tell me real quick. So here we go. Anchoring cells. I have an outline of what I do in class. Let's see. The fill handle. That's called a fill handle. No wonder I didn't remember it. So take the fill handle, that little green dot at the bottom right of the cell where we have typed our formula in, take that little green dot, click and drag it to the right. And hopefully Excel will be smart enough to assume we want that total formula copied across all these cells all the way towards August. So let's try that. I'm going to click on that little fill handle, drag it across under August, and now we have a formula copied across. Is it the right formula? So let's look at this for a second. One of the things we did in class, on our original formula, if you'll notice up here in the formula bar, there's all the columns referenced in this formula are B, the B column, because we were summing January. All the numbers were in B. When we copied this formula over to column C, was Excel smart enough to change all those B's to a C so that it correctly summed the new column we copied to? Well, let's look. I'm going to click in the total for C9, and if I look up in the formula bar, sure enough, Excel assumed correctly that we wanted to edit that formula for column C, and it did. It replaced all those B's with a C. In column D, the formula there, sure enough, all the cell references, all the column references have been changed to D. So Excel, very powerful in automatically filling cells that we're copying to. It makes some assumptions, and oftentimes those assumptions are correct, but always double check. So for example, out here in column D, Excel's copied formula says that the sum of those 5 numbers is 80. Well, we learned earlier how to double check that real quick by just clicking and dragging across that range of numbers and looking at the status bar. So if we go down to the status bar, sure enough, it says that the sum is 80. So sure enough, Excel copied the formulas to the right correctly for us. The problem with very specific cell references, like we built here, we said Excel, we want this cell and this cell and this cell summed up, is that Excel, when we tell it to sum very specific cells, Excel does not make assumptions oftentimes with other changes we make to the spreadsheet. Let me demonstrate. We did this in class. We wanted to add a tank 2A to this list. So what we did, we moved the mouse directly over the row number. And in this case, the row number is 5. The reason we went there is because we want to insert a row right there, move everything down, and type in a new tank number 2A. Okay, so we moved to that, and you'll notice the cursor changed to a black arrow pointing to the right. So it is correctly assuming that we want to deal with this entire row, and that is correct. We then used the right button on the mouse. The right button or right click on the mouse is very handy in a lot of programs because it brings up information or menus that we can use wherever we're at in our work. So if we right click right on that 5, we get a menu of things we can do with that row. You can explore these later. We're going to use some of these, but let's go down into this menu and we're going to click on the word insert. We want to insert a row because we want to insert a tank 2A into our data list. So I click on insert, and sure enough, everything is moved down and we've inserted a blank row where we can now put in our new tank, tank number 2A. So watch what happens when I now type a number. Maybe we built this tank in March or in February and we started it on production in March, so we have numbers in March. So I'm going to put maybe a number in here, 78. Now when I hit enter, you would hope that Excel has automatically figured out that that inserted row should be added to the formula we created down here in row 10. But when I hit enter, nothing changes. So something's wrong. In this case, Excel did not make the right assumption and put this new row into our very specific manually entered formula for us. And so the audit feature of Excel is real handy here. If I click into a cell of a formula that I'm a little questionable about what's going on, this one for sure, I entered more data into the range of cells that we were summing, and my total didn't change. So it's very suspect that something's wrong. So I select the cell where my formula is typed at. You can see I've done that. The little green border is around that cell. If I now go up and click somewhere in the formula bar, left click, Excel now colors all the cell references in the formula bar for me and colors the cells that it is using in that formula. So right away we can see that Excel is not using the new row 5 where we put in 78. We need to add that cell to our formula. Okay, so the way we did that, we're up here in the formula bar. We just need to add another cell to this formula. So we use the plus sign, we hit plus. We clicked on the cell we added to our data. So we clicked on D5. Lo and behold, D5 is now colored and it has been added to our formula in the formula bar. Now when we hit enter, that 80 should change, and it did change to 158. Okay, something's going on here that we talked about. So I'm going to just click up here and have you notice that this formula now has a flag, a little green flag in the upper left-hand corner. And that flag is literally Excel flagging us down. Hey, something wrong with this formula, possibly. You should take a look at it. Hello. So you should pay attention to those flags. It's Excel trying to let you know something, and maybe something's wrong. So let's go see what Excel is telling us, trying to tell us in this cell. So I'm going to click back on the cell with the flag in it, and you'll notice that just to the left of the flag, there's a little caution sign like you'll see out on the roadways, a caution sign with an exclamation mark. If I roll my mouse over that caution sign, just rolled my mouse over it so it's pointing at the caution sign, Excel gives me a little explanatory box of what it thinks is going on with this cell, what it's trying to let us know about. It says the formula in this cell differs from the formulas in this area of the spreadsheet. So that's true. We only corrected the totals formula in column D. We need to correct all the other totals totals in row 10 that do not include the new tank number 2A. The only total that correctly has that new inserted row for us is the one that we edited in cell D10. So one way to take care of this is to grab that fill handle and just drag it to the right. And then all of these cells will now have the corrected formula. Let's check. I'm gonna select cell G10. I'm gonna go up to audit my formula. I'm gonna click in the formula bar, and sure enough, all the cells are selected in my formula. So good thing I fixed all the formulas from March through August. Now, one thing I did not do that we learned in class, I did not fix the formulas to the left of our edited formula in D10. So this formula in C10 and this formula in B10 still does not include row 5. If I audit this formula by clicking in the formula bar, you can see 2A is not selected in this formula. So what I need to do is also take this fill handle and drag it over these other cells so that the old formula is written over by our new corrected formula that includes tank 2A. All right, so now those formulas, if I audit them by clicking in the formula bar, I see that all these cells now are part of my formula, and I'm good to go. I think I'll continue to check these sums as I go. As I build my spreadsheet, and add rows and columns, I always want to double check. Are all the formulas still working as I think they should? And I'll build formulas to ensure that's the case. Okay, so that's one way to build a formula. We did it very manually, very specific cells, kind of hard to do all that, labor intensive. We can use another feature in Excel called a function that is better at assuming what we want when we insert rows and columns, and Excel will make correct assumptions on adding rows and adding columns to our formulas if necessary. So let's learn a little bit about functions. I'm going to start a new totals line here on row 11. I'm going to say total with functions. Okay, we're going to talk in our second class about expanding columns and rows and making them bigger and smaller. I need to expand this a little bit right now so I can see everything the rest of as I work with this. So I'm going to come up here between columns A and B until my cursor becomes an arrow pointing both directions, and I'm just going to click and drag till I have this whole cell visible as a cell. Okay, we're going to start an Excel function to sum these cells of data regarding these tanks. Remember, always in this class, for the purposes of this intro class, always start a formula with an equal sign. So I'm going to click on equals. Now, instead of pointing at cells and whatnot, I'm going to use a sum function. So I'm going to start typing letters of the function name. And typically Excel, the function name is relative to what you are doing, in this case, summing these cells. So I'm going to start typing, and obviously the first letter S. And you'll notice immediately Excel's trying to help us. We've typed an S, so it knows we're entering a function. It gives us a list of all functions that begin with the letter S. That's kind of handy. Pretty big list. I'm gonna go ahead and type a U. I could just quickly type SUM, but I want you all to see how this how Excel tries to help us out here. Now the list is kind of narrowed down to about 10 items, one of which you can see is what we're looking for, sum. Now there's a lot of sums. There's some if, there's some if S, some product, some SQ, a lot of different sums here. I'm going to just assume that sum, the simple word sum, is what we're looking for, but I can get Excel to tell me a little bit about that particular function before I use it. So I'm going to left click on that word sum in this list. And sure enough, Excel gives me a little explanatory box and lets me know that the sum function adds all the numbers in a range of cells. Well, that's exactly what I want to do. So with the word sum highlighted, I got it highlighted by left clicking on it with my mouse. I'm going to hit the Tab key on my keyboard, and Excel types in the rest of the function, the letter M and the left paren, and is ready for us to tell it what we want it to sum. So in this case, we want Excel to sum all the values in the range from B3 to B8. So the way we put that range, B3 to B8, into this function that Excel is building for us right now is we left click and hold in cell B3. So we click down, we're holding the left mouse button down, and we drag across the cells that we want in our range to be summed. Once we've got all the cells we want selected in our range, we let go of that left mouse button. And sure enough, look at what Excel has put into the formula for us, this function formula for us. It's typed B3 colon B8. That's the way Microsoft Excel types a range, defines a range, B3 to B8. It uses the colon as the 2, so B3 to B8. So we've really told Excel what we want it to do. We want it to sum B3 to B8. But you'll notice just before B3, B8, there's a left parenthesis. To finish this function, there needs to be a right parenthesis. Excel is smart enough, if we hit enter on our keyboard right now, it would type that right parenthesis for us, and we'd be done. I just prefer, especially with parentheses, I like to type them. I like to just be in the habit of, I'll put the parentheses where I think they belong. So I just personally am in the habit of typing them. In this case, with what we're doing right now, you could hit enter. Excel would make the right assumption, put in a right paren for you, and everything would be fine. I'm going to hold my shift key down and put in a right paren. There's the function formula that we need. I'll hit enter. And sure enough, our function gave us, fortunately, the same sum that our earlier formula did on these 6 cells. So our function formula worked correctly. We want that formula also in February through August, so you all now know what the fill handle is. Let's use it to click and drag and copy that new function across all these cells to August, like that. So Excel apparently has made our function, our sum function in February and March correctly. If we look up into the formula bar, it changed the column letter B to D as we wanted it to do. It made the correct assumption there. And it has the same values that our earlier sum of those cells show. So it looks like we got that all correct. Now we're going to see the difference between using a function for summing and individually summing specific cells like we did in our first total row. So let's enter another, or insert another row. So I'm going to move my cursor over row number 7, actually move it over the 7 so that I see that little black arrow pointing to the right, showing that Excel is expecting me to work on that entire row, which I am. I'm going to right click on the 7, which brings up a menu of things I can do with that row. As before, I'm going to roll down through these selections and I'm going to click on Insert, because I want to insert a row right there. Sure enough, when I click on Insert, I have now inserted a new row that becomes the new row 7. Okay. And so I've built a new tank, tank 3A, tank number 3A. And maybe I just forgot to have this in my data, and I've added it to this list now. So we had some production in February. We had some production in March. So I'm just going to add some numbers there in February and March. I'm going to put 99 in February, 88 in March. But uh-oh, look what happened to our totals. Now they're different. Our original formula that specified very specific cells did not update. but our formula that included the sum function did update. So let's audit these formulas and see how this looks. I'm going to click and select, therefore, cell C11. I'm going to go up and click in the formula bar. And sure enough, all the cells except our new row 7 is in that original formula we made. So Excel, just as before with tank 2A, did not add C7 to this formula. Not good. Same thing over here, I bet. It didn't add D7 to the formula that we typed in D11. But let's click on our sum function cell where we put in the formula that included a function called sum. And if we audit that by clicking in the formula bar, we can see that Excel has included in its range that new row 7. So when we tell Excel, when we told Excel we wanted it to sum a range from row 3 to row 8, Excel summed that range for us. Then when we came in and we inserted a row into that range, so it expanded the range, Excel correctly assumed that, hey, he's putting a row inside a range that he wanted me to sum. I'm going to include that row in the sum. So using the sum function enabled Excel to assume correctly that we wanted that new row 7 in our total. Very important to think about what kind of formulas we're using and how Excel will treat them when they're copied, when the ranges we're calculating are edited, inserted, deleted, changed in some way, moved. And this is a good example of that. So at this point, I think I suggested I just don't like these individual cells being summed. It's too much of a problem to keep them all accurate and ensuring they're all accurate. So what I did was I deleted this whole row of totals and just got rid of it. Don't like it, don't like the way it's working. I prefer the sum function. So how did we delete this row of totals? Well, once again, we want to act on the entire row. So we moved our cursor over the row number. In this case, on my screen, it's row 11. So I moved my cursor over the 11. It became that little black arrow pointing to the right, pointing at the row. I right-clicked to get a menu of things I could do to that row. And as I look down the menu on this row, one of my options is to delete. And if I click on that, that row is gone. The row I'm left with is the row that has the sum functions that I prefer. Okay, so one other thing we did that showed even how we have to be careful with ranges. So right now I'm on, I've got selected B11. And if I come up here and do the audit on that formula by clicking in the formula bar, you know, I can see that the formula is using the range of cells B3 to B9, which is exactly what I want. I have to be careful though. When I inserted that row 7 in the middle of this range that is included in the sum function, Excel had no problem adjusting the formula to include the new row in its range of cells to be summed. But what if I insert a row that is next to that range? All right, so let's do that real quick. Let's insert a row right where the top of this data is. What we did was we added a tank number 0. So I move my cursor over the number 3. I want to do something to that row. I want to insert a row there, and I want to move everything down. We've done that now a couple times. You know how to do it. We right click on that row number 3. We get the menu. We click on insert, and sure enough, we get a new row where we can type tank number 0. So if I enter some data in, let's go over here to April. If I enter some data in April, January, February, March, wherever, I should see the totals change if Excel has included this new row in the sum function. So let me just add 55 up here to April, and I'll hit enter. Ah, it did not. And we're getting the flag. The flag is telling us, you know, something's up here. Well, we know. Let's see what the flag says. I'm going to click down here on the cell with the flag in it. I'm going to mouse over the little warning. Now, neat message from Excel. The formula in this cell refers to a range that has additional numbers adjacent to it. And that's so exactly true. So if I audit this formula by clicking in the formula bar, sure enough, my range only includes tanks 1 through 5. It does not include the new tank 0 because I inserted that row outside the range of the sum function. I made a new row above the range of data I was summing. So even though Excel noticed, it gave us a warning that, hey, you got data out there next to this range. Are you sure this formula is right? It saw that. It just didn't edit or change our formula because it's not sure that's what we wanted to do. Well, it is what we want to do. We want to include this new cell. And we did that by changing. Right now we're going from cell E4 to E10. That's the range, but we want to start at E3. So we can simply go up here into the formula bar, get next to that 4, get rid of the 4, and make it a 3. And when we do that, look at the range now that's in the audit. You know, it shows that, okay, with that new 3 you typed in the formula, this is the range you're now working with. And that's correct. That's what we want to work with. So even when we use the function sum to sum a range of cells, if we insert a row or insert some data just outside the boundaries of that range, we may, Excel may not assume correctly to add those into the sum function for us. We may have to edit our function formula to include that new row if it's on the outskirts of the range. So in this case, we added a new row 3. Excel did not automatically assume that row 3 should be in our sum range, but it did flag us and say, hey, you got new numbers next to the range that you have me summing. You may look at this. Thank you, Excel. That is, we need to include those new numbers in row 3. So we edited our formula by going up to the formula bar and changing row 4 to row 3 in the range of the formula. So now when we hit enter, our total correctly reflects the new value we put in row 3 for tank 0. But we got another flag. Let's see. If we click in the formula where the flag is, and this is a different flag, let's see what Excel's telling us now. It says, hey, the formula in this cell is different. It differs from the formulas in this area of the spreadsheet. So it's saying, hey, you changed this formula, but the other formulas around this one haven't been changed. They're different. Oh yeah, that's right. Thank you, Excel. Excel is reminding us we correctly edited the formula in E12, got it working correctly to include our new row 3, but we need to copy that new corrected formula across all the other formulas for this range of data, because all the other ones are old. They do not include row 3. So let's do that. We're going to take the formula that is in E12. We're going to grab that fill handle at the bottom right of the cell, click, and drag it through August. So all those formulas are corrected. We're going to select it again, click and drag that little arrow or that little fill handle to the left to correct the formulas for January, February, and March. Okay, so now we can enter, say, a number in February if we've done it right. Let's enter 45 up here. If we've done it right, this 376 should change, and it does. We did it right. What if we put a number way out here in June? Let's say 33, way out here in June. Hopefully this total will become 33 if we copied the sum function correctly. Sure enough, we got it. So we ended the class with the examination of something that was kind of interesting. We tried the average function. So we added a row, or we typed in a row the word average. We inserted a function here. So we started the function with equals, and we started typing average, A, V. When we got to V, Excel now shows the 5 functions that begin with AV. One of those is average, so we clicked on that just to see that, yes, that function returns the average of the numbers that you include in the function. So that's the one we want. I'm going to hit the tab key like we did with sum. Excel automatically types the rest of the word average for me and types a left parenthesis. Now I just need to include the range I want averaged into this function, and I do that. I want to average cells B3 through B10, so I'll click and hold in cell B3, and then I'll drag down across B10 and let go the mouse button. Sure enough, down here, Excel has put that range into our function. We now have average B3 to B10 in our function. I personally like typing the closing paren, so I'm going to type that closing paren, and our function, our formula is complete. I'm going to hit enter, and Excel is telling me that the average of these cells is 1,731. Is that correct? Well, let's click and drag across those cells and look down at the status bar, and sure enough, the status bar says that the average of those cells is 1,731. But we noticed during class that the very next thing in the status bar is count. And across that range we've selected, count is reporting that there's only 5 numbers there. That's true. There are only 5 numbers there. But there are 8 cells. There's 8 tanks. Now I'm confused. Is the average 1,731, is that giving us the average of just the 5 numbers? Or is it giving us the average of all 8 tanks, 3 of which are 0? That's what we left to look at for our next class, Tuesday. So I hope this video is helpful in that, you know, it kind of went through, I'm sure I probably forgot some things that we went over in class, but I think this will help you get to where most of where we got to in our first class yesterday, Tuesday. Don't forget to save your work. Couple things to remind you about on save. Up here on my title bar, I actually have a save button. So I can look at the name, Excel Intro 1-1 for recording. Yep, that's the file I want to save this data to. So I can just click that save button. I could go in here and use the File tab like we did earlier and click Save. I mentioned I kind of like using Save As. You could use Save As. While we're here though, one thing I pointed out to all of you is to go all the way down to the bottom of this menu and click on Options. And in the options for Excel, there is a whole bunch of options around save. So I had you click on this save bunch of options. And I just wanted you all to make sure that this box right here is checked. To have Excel save auto recover information every so many minutes. You can drop that value. You can change it to 3 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever. The idea is you may forget to save. You may get so involved in your spreadsheet that you do hours worth of work and forget to save it. If you forget to save, with this box checked, Excel every 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever you specify, is automatically saving your spreadsheet for you into a special place, not to your file, but into a special place in Excel. So that if you have a power outage, your computer blows up, and you're thinking, oh man, I didn't save. When the power comes back on and you turn your computer on and you open up Excel, in that case, Excel will say, hey, I have a version of a spreadsheet that I was auto-recovering when something happened. Do you want to take a look at that spreadsheet? You're like, yes, thank you. And you'll get at least your spreadsheet back within a couple minutes of when you last worked on it. Far better than losing hours of work. So make sure that in the Excel file options under Save, you have this box checked to save auto recover information every so often. Okay. And again, make sure you've saved your work. And I think I've covered everything. I'm gonna sign off here then, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it's valuable to you. We'll see you in our next class next Tuesday. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and I'll stop this video presentation. See you Tuesday. Bye-bye.